The Great Migration of 1843 marked a pivotal moment in American history, as a single wagon train's perilous journey across the continent forever altered the nation's trajectory. This epic trek, driven by economic pressures and land hunger, would prove that families could survive the unforgiving wilderness and spark a mass migration to Oregon country. As we embark on this thrilling narrative, the dusty trails of 1843 come alive, beckoning us to follow in the footsteps of brave pioneers who dared to reshape the future of a nation. As the winter of 1842 gave way to the promise of a new year, the American fascination with Oregon country continued to intensify, fueled by the joint U.S.-British occupation of this vast and fertile territory. The Mississippi Valley, meanwhile, was experiencing economic pressures that would soon become a catalyst for the Great Migration. Land hunger, sparked by the allure of cheap and abundant land in the West, had begun to gnaw at the minds of settlers who saw the Oregon Territory as a potential haven from the financial struggles and overcrowding that plagued their current homes. Missionaries like Marcus Whitman and Henry Spalding, who had traveled to Oregon in 1836, sent back tantalizing reports of the region's natural riches and the vast opportunities for settlement. Their accounts, combined with those of fur traders like John Jacob Astor's Pacific Fur Company, which had established a series of trading posts in the region, helped to stir the imagination of Americans regarding the possibilities that Oregon presented. Earlier exploratory journeys, such as those undertaken by Robert Stewart in 1812 and Jedediah Smith in 1824, had also contributed to the growing sense of wonder and curiosity about this western frontier. It was against this backdrop of growing interest and economic necessity that the organization of the 1843 Emigrant Company began to take shape. In early 1843, a group of settlers from the Mississippi Valley, primarily from the states of Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri, started making plans for a mass migration to Oregon country. These pioneers, driven by a mix of adventure, economic necessity, and the promise of new beginnings, were not content to simply hear tales of the West. They wanted to experience it for themselves. The decision to migrate was not taken lightly, especially since it involved not just individual settlers, but entire families. The commitment required was total: to leave behind the familiar, to brave the unknown dangers of the trail, and to endure the hardships that would inevitably arise during the journey. Yet, as the spring of 1843 approached, a sense of determination and purpose began to solidify among these prospective emigrants. They saw in Oregon not just a place of refuge, but an opportunity to forge a new life, free from the constraints of the East and filled with the promise of land, prosperity, and a future brighter than any they could currently imagine. As the organization of the Emigrant Company progressed, so did the practical preparations for the journey. Wagons were readied, supplies were stockpiled, and routes were planned. The settlers knew that their trek would be long and arduous, spanning over 2,000 miles of wilderness terrain, but they were undaunted. With each passing day, their resolve strengthened, fueled by the conviction that they were on the cusp of something momentous, a journey that would not only change their lives, but also leave an indelible mark on the history of the American West. As the spring of 1843 unfolded, the Missouri frontier buzzed with activity as settlers from Independence, Westport, and nearby settlements made final preparations for their departure. The jumping-off points, where the wagons would finally leave the comforts of civilization behind, were abuzz with excitement and nervous energy. Families, some with young children and infants, busied themselves with last-minute tasks, checking wagon wheels, replenishing supplies, and bidding farewell to loved ones who would remain behind. The composition of the wagon train was a testament to the diversity of the American frontier. Families from various backgrounds, including farmers, merchants, and artisans, had joined forces, bringing with them a wide range of skills and expertise. Livestock, too, played a crucial role in the expedition, with cattle, oxen, and horses providing the necessary propulsion for the journey ahead. Leaders, such as John Gant and Peter Hembry, emerged from within the group, their experience and knowledge of the wilderness invaluable to the success of the endeavor. Wagons, sturdy and dependable, were the lifeblood of the expedition, Constructed from seasoned oak and hickory, these vehicles would need to withstand the unforgiving terrain that lay ahead. Supplies, carefully stockpiled over the preceding months, included flour, bacon, beans, and salt, as well as tools, spare parts, and medical equipment. Trail logistics, too, were a major concern, with the settlers needing to navigate treacherous river crossings, steep mountain passes, and arid plains. To facilitate the journey, the group had elected to follow the established Oregon Trail, which would take them along the Little Blue River, across present-day Kansas, and into the uncharted territories beyond. As the day of departure drew near, the settlers gathered to elect their trail leadership and establish basic rules for the journey ahead. John Gant, a seasoned frontiersman, was chosen to lead the expedition, with Peter Hembry serving as his second-in-command. Rules were established regarding the daily schedule, with set times for departure, rest, and arrival, as well as guidelines for hunting, camping, and conflict resolution. With these formalities attended to, the settlers felt a sense of relief wash over them, knowing that they were now a cohesive unit, bound together by a shared purpose. As the wagon train departed from the Missouri frontier, they embarked on a journey that would take them across the Great Plains, a vast expanse of rolling hills, towering prairies, and meandering rivers. The late spring air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming wildflowers and the earthy smell of freshly turned soil. The settlers followed the Platte River Valley, which provided a reliable source of water and a relatively flat terrain, ideal for wagon travel. The river's tranquil waters flowed gently through the landscape, its banks lined with cottonwood trees and willows, offering shade and shelter from the scorching sun. As they traveled, the daily routines of the settlers became more defined. Each morning, before dawn broke, the camp would stir to life, with families emerging from their tents to start the day's chores. The sound of clanging pots, the lowing of cattle, and the chatter of children filled the air as the settlers prepared for another day on the trail. Wagon masters would inspect the vehicles, checking for any damage or wear, while others would tend to the livestock, feeding and watering the animals. Women would busy themselves with cooking breakfast, often a simple meal of bacon, beans, and bread, which would sustain them throughout the morning. As the train moved forward, hunters would be sent ahead to scout for game, their rifles at the ready to provide fresh meat for the evening's meal. The Great Plains teemed with wildlife, including buffalo, antelope, and deer, which provided a welcome respite from the monotony of dried and salted provisions. However, hunting was not without its risks, as the settlers had to be mindful of the unpredictable nature of the animals and the ever-present threat of attack by hostile Native American tribes. On one occasion, a group of hunters stumbled upon a small herd of buffalo, which they successfully harvested, providing the train with a bounty of fresh meat that would last for several days. Encounters with Plains indigenous peoples were inevitable, and the settlers approached these interactions with a mix of caution and curiosity. The wagon train had been warned about the potential dangers of interacting with Native American tribes, but they also recognized the importance of establishing good relations, as these encounters could be crucial to their survival. On one occasion, a group of Omaha warriors approached the train, their faces painted with ceremonial markings, and their eyes fixed intently on the settlers. The wagon masters, aware of the potential for conflict, took steps to ensure that the encounter remained peaceful, offering gifts of tobacco and cloth in exchange for safe passage through their territory. As the days turned into weeks, the settlers began to feel the effects of the grueling journey. The constant exposure to the elements, combined with the physical demands of travel, began to take its toll on the group's morale. Tensions rose as disagreements over leadership, resources, and route choices began to surface. To manage these tensions, the wagon masters established a system of councils where representatives from each family would gather to discuss grievances and make collective decisions. These councils helped to maintain cohesion within the train, allowing the settlers to address their differences and work towards a common goal. Despite these challenges, the settlers persevered, driven by their determination to reach the Oregon Territory and establish new lives. As they traversed the Great Plains, they began to appreciate the beauty and majesty of the landscape, which stretched out before them like an endless sea. The sunsets were breathtaking, with hues of pink, orange, and purple, painting the sky, a reminder of the awe-inspiring power of nature. And as they settled into their evening camps, surrounded by the sounds of the prairie, they knew that they were part of something much larger than themselves, a great migration that would shape the course of American history. The daily routines of camp life became more comfortable, with families establishing their own little communities within the larger train. Children would play together, chasing each other through the tall grass, while women would gather to share stories and gossip. Men would sit around the campfire, swapping tales of adventure and bravery, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. As the night wore on, the settlers would retire to their tents, exhausted but content, knowing that they had made progress on their journey and that tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. As the wagon train continued westward, they encountered an increasing number of Native American tribes, each with their own distinct culture and traditions. The settlers were struck by the diversity of these encounters, which ranged from friendly exchanges to tense standoffs. On one occasion, a group of Cheyenne warriors approached the train, their eyes fixed on the settlers' livestock. The wagon masters, aware of the potential for conflict, took steps to ensure that the encounter remained peaceful, offering gifts of food and cloth in exchange for safe passage through their territory. The management of morale and cohesion within the train became an increasingly important concern as the settlers faced numerous challenges and setbacks on their journey. The wagon masters recognized that the success of the expedition depended on the ability of the group to work together, sharing resources and supporting one another through difficult times. To promote unity and cooperation, they established a system of shared responsibilities where each family would contribute to the collective well-being of the train. This approach helped to foster a sense of community and belonging, which was essential for the settlers' survival on the harsh and unforgiving Great Plains. As midsummer 1843 set in, the emigrant party faced a new and formidable challenge: the onset of disease. Cholera, in particular, began to spread rapidly through the train, its highly contagious and deadly nature striking fear into the hearts of all who traveled. The disease was exacerbated by the poor sanitation and hygiene practices along the route, as well as the close quarters in which the emigrants lived. The first reported case was that of a young child who succumbed to the illness after a mere 24 hours of suffering. The family, devastated by their loss, held a hasty burial service, laying their child to rest in a shallow grave alongside the trail. As the days passed, more and more cases of cholera emerged, each one a stark reminder of the party's vulnerability. Accidents, too, began to take their toll, as exhausted and weakened emigrants stumbled and fell, injuring themselves on the rough terrain. One such accident occurred when a wagon wheel came loose, sending its occupants tumbling to the ground. A young woman, badly injured in the incident, died shortly thereafter, her body laid to rest beside that of the child who had fallen to cholera just days before. The emotional toll of these losses began to weigh heavily on the party, as grief and despair settled over the camp like a shroud. Tensions rose as disagreements over leadership and route choices began to surface once more. Some argued that the party should press on, determined to reach the Oregon Territory despite the mounting losses, while others advocated for a more cautious approach, suggesting that they rest and regroup before continuing. As these internal disputes simmered, the party began to splinter, with smaller groups breaking off from the main train in search of safer, more direct routes. One such group, led by a charismatic young leader named Jenkins, set out on a northerly course, hoping to avoid the disease-ridden areas that had claimed so many lives. Others, however, remained committed to the original route, convinced that it offered the best chance of success. Despite these divisions, the determination to continue remained strong, fueled by a deep-seated resolve to reach the promised land of Oregon. The party's leaders, aware of the need for unity and cooperation, worked tirelessly to mediate disputes and maintain morale. Councils were held regularly, where representatives from each family gathered to discuss grievances and make collective decisions. As the party pressed on, they encountered more and more instances of disease and death, each one a stark reminder of the risks they had undertaken. And yet, even in the face of such adversity, the emigrants persevered, driven by a fierce determination to succeed. They adapted to their circumstances, learning new skills and developing innovative solutions to the challenges they faced. One notable example of this adaptability was the development of makeshift hospitals, where those afflicted with cholera and other illnesses could receive treatment and care. These improvised medical facilities, often little more than tents or makeshift shelters, were staffed by volunteer nurses and doctors who worked tirelessly to save as many lives as possible. As the summer wore on, the party faced numerous challenges, from raging rivers to treacherous mountain passes, and yet, through it all, they continued to push forward, driven by a shared vision of a brighter future in the Oregon Territory. Despite the losses they had suffered, despite the hardships and the heartbreak, the emigrants remained resolute, their determination to succeed burning brighter with each passing day. As the emigrants ventured deeper into the Rocky Mountains, they encountered the formidable challenge of crossing South Pass, a notorious stretch of terrain that would test their resolve and push their endurance to the limit. The late summer of 1843 had brought little relief from the scorching heat, and the scarcity of grass and water only exacerbated the difficulties they faced. Weakened livestock struggled to find sustenance in the barren landscape, and the wagons, too, began to show signs of wear, their wooden frames creaking under the strain of the rugged terrain. The loss of livestock was a devastating blow, as many families had invested their life savings in these animals, which were not only their means of transportation, but also their sole source of sustenance. The death of a single ox could spell disaster for a family, leaving them without the necessary power to haul their wagons across the treacherous terrain. As the days passed, the number of abandoned wagons and livestock carcasses grew, a grim reminder of the perils that lay ahead. As the emigrants descended into the Snake River region, they were met with a harsh and unforgiving landscape, where rocky outcroppings and steep canyons threatened to swallow them whole. The river itself was a force to be reckoned with, its swift currents and hidden eddies posing a constant danger to those attempting to ford it. The families were forced to navigate this treacherous terrain with caution, often spending hours searching for a safe crossing point, only to find themselves thwarted by the unpredictable waters. The strain of this journey was beginning to take its toll on the families, who were being tested to their limits by the harsh conditions and the relentless pressure to press onward. The traditional family-based migration pattern, which had served them so well in the past, was now being pushed to its breaking point as the demands of the trail threatened to overwhelm even the most resilient households. As they struggled to cope with the loss of livestock, the scarcity of food, and the constant danger that lurked around every bend, the emigrants were forced to confront the very real possibility that they might not survive this journey intact. In the face of such adversity, the bonds of family and community were stretched to their limits, as individuals were forced to rely on one another for support and comfort. The women, in particular, played a crucial role in maintaining the cohesion of the group, as they worked tirelessly to care for the sick, feed the hungry, and soothe the frightened. Their efforts helped to sustain the emigrants, both physically and emotionally, as they navigated the most challenging terrain of their journey thus far. As the emigrants continued on their westward trek, they encountered an increasing number of Native American tribes, whose reactions to the newcomers ranged from curiosity to hostility. The Snake River region was home to a diverse array of indigenous peoples, each with their own distinct culture and traditions. While some tribes, such as the Shoshone, were generally friendly and willing to trade with the emigrants, others, like the Blackfoot, were more aggressive, and their encounters with the travelers often ended in violence. The emigrants' interactions with these Native American tribes added a new layer of complexity to their journey as they struggled to navigate the intricacies of intercultural communication and avoid conflict whenever possible. The need to establish peaceful relations with the indigenous peoples was paramount, as the emigrants relied on them for guidance, trade, and, in some cases, protection from other hostile tribes. As they traversed the Snake River region, the emigrants were forced to adapt to a constantly shifting landscape, both physically and culturally, where the rules of engagement were forever changing. As the emigrants began their descent toward the Columbia Plateau in early fall 1843, the landscape shifted from the rugged terrain of the Snake River region to a more gentle, rolling hillscape. However, this change in topography brought little relief, as the travelers were now facing the cumulative effects of exhaustion and resource depletion. The constant strain of navigating treacherous terrain, coupled with the scarcity of food and water, had taken a devastating toll on both the people and their livestock. Many families were forced to abandon their wagons, which had become cumbersome and impractical in the face of the region's numerous rivers and streams. In their place, makeshift transport methods were employed, such as rafts and dugout canoes, which allowed the emigrants to ferry their remaining belongings across the waterways. This shift marked a significant turning point in the journey, as the travelers were now abandoning the trappings of their former lives in favor of a more primitive, survival-oriented existence. Fortunately, guidance from missionaries and earlier settlers proved invaluable during this period. Men like Marcus Whitman and Samuel Barrett, who had established missions in the region, provided crucial advice on navigation, trade, and cultural exchange with the indigenous peoples. Their knowledge helped to facilitate the emigrants' passage through the Columbia Plateau, where they encountered a complex web of Native American tribes, each with their own distinct customs and protocols. As the emigrants drew closer to the Columbia River, they began to notice the first signs of permanent settlement. The presence of established trade routes, mission stations, and even fledgling farms marked a significant departure from the wilderness landscape they had traversed for so long. The promise of a more stable, settled existence was a powerful draw, and many families began to envision a future where they might put down roots and build new lives. The guidance of earlier settlers and missionaries played a crucial role in helping the emigrants navigate this transition. For example, Marcus Whitman's mission at Wailatpu provided a vital stopping point for travelers, offering food, shelter, and medical care to those in need. The Whitmans also facilitated trade between the emigrants and local Native American tribes, helping to establish a fragile peace that would be essential for the survival of the settlement. As the emigrants continued their journey along the Columbia River, they encountered an increasing number of settlers who had arrived earlier in the season. These pioneers shared valuable knowledge about the region's geography, climate, and indigenous peoples, helping the newcomers to avoid common pitfalls and establish themselves more quickly. The sense of community that began to form among these early settlers would prove essential in the months and years to come, as they worked together to build a thriving, permanent settlement in the Oregon Territory. The landscape itself was also beginning to reveal its secrets to the emigrants. The Columbia River, with its vast, navigable waters, offered a tantalizing prospect for trade and commerce. The surrounding countryside, though challenging, held promise for agriculture and livestock husbandry. As the emigrants explored this new territory, they began to envision a future where they might build prosperous, self-sufficient lives, free from the hardships and uncertainties of the trail. As the emigrants continued along the Columbia River, they finally caught sight of Fort Vancouver, a bustling hub of trade and commerce that marked the end of their arduous journey. The fort, established by the Hudson's Bay Company, was a welcome haven for the weary travelers who had endured countless hardships on the trail. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the fort's chief factor, John McLaughlin, who provided temporary shelter and aid to the exhausted emigrants. Many of the emigrants also sought refuge at nearby missions, such as the Methodist Mission at Willamette Falls, where Jason Lee and his fellow missionaries offered food, shelter, and medical care. These established communities played a vital role in helping the newcomers recover from their ordeal and prepare for the challenges of settling in the Willamette Valley. As the emigrants dispersed across the valley, they began to stake their claims on the fertile land, with many opting to settle near the Willamette River, which offered access to water, game, and arable soil. However, despite the promise of a new life, the emigrants soon faced immediate challenges in securing food and housing. The lack of infrastructure and resources meant that many had to rely on makeshift shelters, such as lean-tos or tents, while they worked to clear and cultivate their land. Food was also scarce, with many families relying on the charity of established settlers or the limited supplies available at Fort Vancouver. The harsh realities of pioneer life quickly set in, as the emigrants struggled to adapt to the unforgiving environment and eke out a living from the land. The psychological impact of completing the journey was also beginning to take its toll on the emigrants. Many had experienced trauma, loss, and hardship on the trail, and the sudden relief of arriving at their destination was often tempered by feelings of exhaustion, anxiety, and uncertainty about the future. As they struggled to come to terms with their new surroundings and the daunting task of building a new life, some emigrants began to exhibit signs of what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, while others simply felt a deep sense of relief and gratitude at having made it through the ordeal alive. As the emigrants settled into their new lives in the Willamette Valley, the news of their successful crossing of the continent sent shockwaves throughout the United States. The 1843 wagon train, which had once been deemed a foolhardy endeavor, had proven that families could indeed cross the vast expanse of the American West and establish a new life in the Oregon Territory. This realization sparked a surge of interest in American settlement in Oregon, as thousands of would-be pioneers began to make plans for their own journey across the continent. The arrival of over 800 settlers in the Willamette Valley in late 1843 marked a significant turning point in the history of Oregon country. The balance of power in the region, which had long been dominated by the British Hudson's Bay Company, began to shift in favor of the Americans. As more and more settlers arrived, the need for a formal government became increasingly pressing. In response, a group of settlers gathered at Champoeg, a small settlement on the Willamette River, to discuss the formation of a provisional government. The meeting, which took place on May 2, 1843, marked the beginning of a new era in Oregon's history. The settlers, who were largely American, voted to establish a provisional government that would oversee the administration of the territory until the United States Congress could formally organize it as a territory. This move was seen as a bold assertion of American authority in the region, and it marked a significant challenge to British claims on the territory. The impact of the 1843 migration on the indigenous peoples of the region was profound. The arrival of so many new settlers put immense pressure on the Native American tribes who had long inhabited the Willamette Valley. As the settlers began to clear land and establish farms, they encroached on traditional Native American hunting grounds and sparked tensions with the local tribes. The Cayuse, in particular, were affected by the arrival of the settlers, as their traditional way of life was disrupted by the influx of new people. The 1843 migration also marked a turning point in U.S. expansion, as it demonstrated that the United States could successfully establish settlements on the Pacific coast. This realization sparked a renewed sense of interest in westward expansion, and it set the stage for the massive migrations that would take place in the decades to come. The Oregon Trail, which had once been a small, insignificant route, became a major thoroughfare for thousands of settlers, and it played a central role in the development of the American West. As the winter of 1843-44 set in, the settlers in the Willamette Valley began to establish themselves as a thriving community. They built homes, cleared land, and planted crops, and they worked to establish trade relationships with the local Native American tribes. The arrival of the 1843 wagon train had marked the beginning of a new era in Oregon's history, one that would be shaped by the interactions between the settlers, the Native Americans, and the British. As the years went by, the consequences of this single wagon train would continue to reverberate throughout the region, shaping the course of American expansion and forever altering the landscape of the Pacific Northwest. The establishment of a provisional government in Oregon marked a significant milestone in the development of the territory. The settlers, who had once been viewed as outsiders, were now taking steps to formalize their presence in the region. This move was seen as a challenge to British authority, and it sparked a renewed sense of interest in the territory from both the United States and Great Britain. As tensions between the two nations continued to simmer, the settlers in Oregon remained focused on building their new community, unaware of the larger geopolitical forces that were at play. The winter months brought significant challenges to the settlers, as they struggled to adapt to the harsh conditions of the Pacific Northwest. The rain, which was relentless and unforgiving, made it difficult for them to clear land and establish farms. Despite these challenges, the settlers persevered, using their skills and ingenuity to overcome the obstacles that stood in their way. As the spring of 1844 approached, the settlers were poised to make significant progress in establishing themselves as a thriving community, one that would play a central role in the development of the American West. The Great Migration of 1843 was a pivotal moment in American history, marking the beginning of a new era in westward expansion and forever altering the landscape of the Pacific Northwest. The bravery and perseverance of those who made the treacherous journey across the continent paved the way for thousands more to follow, shaping the course of the United States and leaving an indelible mark on the region. As we reflect on this remarkable event, we are reminded that the power of human determination can overcome even the most daunting challenges, and that the stories of our past continue to inspire and inform us today. And so, as we bring this chapter to a close, we remember the men, women, and children who dared to dream of a new life beyond the horizon and whose legacy continues to unfold in the American West. Thank you for joining me throughout this historical journey. Until we meet again, I'm Herodotus, reminding you that history isn't just a story, it's our story. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.